Greetings to my dear guests on this video. I wish you a pleasant viewing and look forward to your feedback in the comments. They say 50 is the new 30. Honestly, I've never quite agreed, especially when my knees remind me who's really in charge every time I climb the office stairs. But despite the occasional ache, I've never felt more grounded, more certain. I'd earned every silver strand in my hair, every line that framed my eyes. And in the right lighting, usually right under the conference room fluorescence, I looked formidable. I've worked at Viridian Strategies for 15 years. It's one of those boutique consultancy firms where the clients are Fortune 500 and the coffee is perpetually burnt. Our office is perched on the 19th floor of a mirrored tower in Midtown. My desk has a view of the skyline and a smudge of green from the park below. But more than the skyline or the overpriced espresso, it's the respect I've earned here that I treasure most. My name is Liz. I'm 52 years old. I lead the analytical systems department, and despite what some might assume based on my age, I am not someone who coasts. I'm the one they call when things fall apart, when the timelines collapse, when the data tells a story no one wants to read. I'm not loud. I don't network like a 20-something or throw around buzzwords to sound impressive, but people listen when I speak. They know I won't waste their time. Ask Liz had become something of a mantra around the office. Need to understand the metrics behind a failing campaign? Ask Liz. Trouble with a stubborn integration? Ask Liz. Even the new hires caught on quickly. If the system's blinking red, don't panic. Just ask Liz. So when the executive team announced a full-scale strategy meeting to be held next week, a vision alignment session, whatever that was supposed to mean, I was more curious than worried. These meetings happened about twice a year, usually a mix of PowerPoints, jargon, and a lot of head nodding. But this one felt different. There was a buzz around it, a hush. And then there was Ethan. Ethan was the CEO's son. Just out of business school, full of ideas and certainty. He'd been hired 3 months ago into a newly created role, Chief Innovation Architect. What that actually meant, no one really knew. He wore flashy suits and talked about disruption a lot. He moved through the office like he owned the air, always with a cappuccino in one hand and his phone in the other. People humored him. I tolerated him. A week before the meeting, I was called into a pre-session alignment huddle with a few other department leads. Ethan chaired it, of course. He opened with a 10-minute monologue about market pivots and synergy ecosystems. I sipped my coffee and took notes, pretending not to notice the way his gaze skipped over me whenever he asked for input. I wasn't rattled. I'd seen 100 Ethans come and go. The ones who underestimated you the moment they saw your face or heard your title. The ones who thought experience was outdated. What he didn't know, what he couldn't possibly understand, is that wisdom isn't loud. It's quiet, precise, sharp like a scalpel. Back in my office, I pulled up the last 5 years of performance data. If we were going to talk about strategy, I wanted the truth on my side. I pored over figures, patterns, efficiency reports, everything. Numbers never lie, and they're the one language I speak fluently. Still, I couldn't shake a feeling, something unsettled. Maybe it was the way Ethan had smiled during that meeting, too polished, or the way he'd used phrases like generational refresh and operational sunsetting, as if he were rehearsing for a TED Talk instead of leading real people. That night, I stayed late, finalizing my presentation. My part in the meeting was simple. An overview of our data infrastructure and future optimization roadmap. Nothing flashy, just facts. But I printed an extra copy of my talking points, just in case. As the office lights dimmed and the cleaning crew shuffled in, I stood by the window with my notes in hand, the city glowing below. 15 years. And in a few days, I'd walk into that boardroom, ready to contribute like always. I had no idea how much would change. By Monday morning, the energy in the office had changed. People were unusually quiet, like they were collectively bracing for something. Whispers floated between cubicles, but no one said anything directly. That is, until the internal memo hit our inboxes at exactly 8:17 a.m. Subject. Change of plans. Upcoming strategy meeting, dear team. Due to an urgent matter requiring my presence in Dallas this week, I will unfortunately be unable to attend Wednesday's strategy session. Ethan will lead the meeting in my place. I trust in his ability to guide the conversation and appreciate your support in ensuring a smooth process. Best, Ronald Kinsey, CEO. I stared at the screen for a few seconds longer than necessary. Dallas? That was out of nowhere. Ronald rarely traveled unless it was absolutely necessary. He liked to be hands-on, especially with big internal presentations like this one. And then there was Ethan. I leaned back in my chair and exhaled slowly. It wasn't that I thought he couldn't handle a meeting. He was, after all, a grown man. But handle wasn't the same as understand, and Ronald, whatever his flaws, always had a way of grounding these meetings in realism. He kept the visionary talk in check. Without him there, I had no doubt Ethan would take the stage like a spotlight-hungry actor handed a blank script. Still, it wasn't my place to question the reshuffle. I was just supposed to show up, deliver my segment, and sit down, like always. That morning, I passed Ronald's office on the way to the break room. The door was slightly ajar, and I caught a glimpse of him in his navy overcoat, suitcase by the door. He looked tired. His wife, Evelyn, stood beside him. She wasn't just our head of HR. She was the soul of the place, the kind of person who remembered birthdays and knew everyone's kid's name by heart. "I don't feel right about leaving," she was saying quietly. "You know how he gets when the room is listening. He doesn't filter." Ronald sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. "It's just a strategy update. Nothing too complex. He'll be fine. You'll be there, won't you?" "I'll be there," Evelyn said firmly, though her frown didn't ease. "But that doesn't mean he'll listen." I kept walking, pretending I hadn't heard, but I carried those words with me all the way back to my desk. By Wednesday, the morning of the meeting, the tension had settled into something almost brittle. Everyone was dressed a little sharper, speaking a little softer. A few people rehearsed their updates under their breath. I wore a simple slate gray blazer with pearl earrings, my quiet armor. At 10 a.m. sharp, we all filed into the main conference room. The long oak table gleamed under the recessed lighting. A carafe of coffee steamed gently at the back of the room. Chairs scraped the floor as people took their places. I took my usual seat 3 places from the end, next to Raj from operations and Cynthia from client relations. Evelyn was already there, seated to the left of the head chair, a calm but unreadable expression on her face. She greeted everyone warmly, like she always did, even if her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. Then Ethan walked in. He was dressed like he was about to host a tech summit. Midnight blue suit, no tie, crisp white shirt with the top 2 buttons undone. A little too casual for a company-wide strategy session, but no one said anything. "Good morning, everyone," he called out, clapping his hands once. "Let's get started." And just like that, the meeting began. To his credit, the first half went smoothly. Ethan introduced the agenda with surprising polish. He even cracked a few jokes that actually landed, lightening the room. Raj gave a concise report on logistics restructuring. Cynthia outlined new client onboarding metrics. I watched Ethan nod and murmur encouraging phrases like "great insight" and "we'll flag that for Q3." It wasn't perfect, but it wasn't a disaster either. Still, something about his energy made me sit a little straighter, like he was leading us somewhere without a map, grinning as he went. I waited my turn, fingers resting on my printed notes, eyes flicking toward Evelyn, who occasionally shot glances at her son that I couldn't quite interpret. I didn't know it yet, but we were approaching a moment that would change everything. I'd been so focused on my notes, I barely noticed the shift in the room's energy. Not at first. The meeting was progressing. Ethan was moving through the agenda faster now, more animated, riding the high of his own momentum. I could see the way he glanced around after every statement, seeking approval like a performer feeding on applause. And then, it was my turn. I stood up calmly, gripping my printed notes. I'd done this 100 times before. My slides were clear, data tight, conclusions actionable. I began speaking, slow, deliberate. A few graphs on infrastructure load balancing, projected cost savings, scalability metrics. The room was silent, attentive, except for Ethan. He leaned back in his chair, arms folded, jaw tight. His eyes never really met mine. He was listening, but not to understand, just waiting. I was finishing the last slide when it happened. Ethan interrupted me, loudly. Okay, he said, waving a hand. We've heard enough spreadsheets and legacy logic. There was a flicker of confusion around the table. My mouth went dry, but I kept standing. He didn't stop. Then, clear as day, he turned to the room and said, "What is this old woman still doing here?" The silence was instant, violent. No one moved, not a breath. Ethan kept going, voice dripping with disdain. "We are not a pension fund. We are a progressive company. You are fired." That word, fired, hung in the air like a broken light bulb. Shocking, useless, painful. I felt Evelyn stiffen, heard Cynthia inhale sharply next to me. But I didn't speak. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I closed my laptop, gathered my notes, and walked out of the room in silence. No one stopped me. No one said a word. Not yet. As I stepped into the hallway, the door slowly clicking shut behind me, I felt strangely light, detached, like the ground had fallen out from under me, but I was still upright, still breathing. My heels echoed against the tile as I walked back to my office. There would be fallout, I knew that. But in that moment, I didn't think about revenge. I only thought, he has no idea what he just did. It had been 3 days since the meeting. I hadn't checked my work email. I hadn't answered the handful of texts I received, from Raj, from Cynthia, even one awkward message from the intern in marketing that just said, "I'm so sorry." That was insane. Instead, I had spent the weekend walking the quiet streets near my apartment, sipping coffee that didn't taste like obligation, and trying to make sense of what had happened. Part of me still didn't believe it. No exit interview, no HR protocol, just a public humiliation and a cold dismissal by a man who wore arrogance like a second skin. But Monday always comes, and it came for Viridian Strategies too. Ronald Kinsey, my actual boss, the founder and CEO, returned from Dallas that morning. He wasn't in the building 10 minutes before Evelyn pulled him into his office and closed the door. No one knew exactly what was said, but the blinds were drawn, and from the murmurs that slipped through the frosted glass, it wasn't a pleasant conversation. Half an hour later, Ronald summoned Ethan. Witnesses said his voice echoed down the hallway before the door even shut behind them. "You what?" Ethan tried to explain. "It wasn't working," he said, according to someone who passed by at the wrong moment. "She's old school. We need a fresh image. Data's important, but—" "She's not old school," Ronald interrupted, voice sharp with disbelief. "She's foundational. She's the reason we have systems that work. Do you even know what she's built here?" Ethan faltered. I thought, "No, you didn't think. You postured." Silence. "She's been with this company for 15 years, Ethan. She pulled us through the 2011 client loss when we almost shut our doors. She rebuilt our infrastructure after the crash in 2015. Do you remember the Baxter account? They nearly left until Liz rewrote their entire analytics pipeline overnight. That contract brings in $2.4 million annually. They renew every year because of her." "I didn't know?" Ronald finished for him. "Clearly." More silence. Then Ronald's voice, low but decisive. "You are going to fix this. You're going to find her, apologize, and offer her position back, plus a bonus for this complete humiliation. If she says no, I'll understand. But you're going to make that offer, Ethan, publicly, because this company doesn't erase people who built it just to stroke someone's ego." Apparently, Ethan said nothing, just nodded, face pale. And across the city, as I stood in line at my favorite cafe, staring blankly at the muffins behind the glass, my phone buzzed. New message. "Ronald Kinsey Liz, we need to talk. Please let me know when you're available. I'm so sorry for what happened." I didn't reply, not yet. I ordered my coffee, took it to the park, and sat in the spring sunlight. Let them sit in it a little longer. The calls started early. The first one lit up my phone just after 9. Ethan's name glared at me from the screen, but I didn't move to answer. I let it ring until it faded to voicemail, then turned the phone face down on the kitchen counter. A few minutes later, it buzzed again. And again. By noon, I had 6 missed calls and 3 voicemails, none of which I intended to listen to. I didn't need to hear excuses or manufactured remorse. I didn't care if he was sorry, or if Ronald had sent him on some forced apology tour. What mattered was what had already happened, and that couldn't be unsaid. He had humiliated me, publicly, loudly, without hesitation. He hadn't pulled me aside. He hadn't voiced concerns. He hadn't even asked a single question about my work, my value, my legacy in that place. He'd looked around the room, decided I didn't fit his aesthetic, and discarded me like an outdated office chair. That kind of wound doesn't heal with voicemails. I tried to distract myself with errands. Grocery store, dry cleaners, even stopped by the park and sat with a book I didn't read. But no matter what I did, the phone kept lighting up every few hours. I didn't respond. I wouldn't. By the time dusk rolled in, I was tired. Not from the walking, but from holding back everything I wanted to scream into a voicemail that would be too polite for him to understand. When I pulled into my driveway, the porch light was already glowing. And then I saw him. Ethan. Standing on the sidewalk just outside my gate, hands in his coat pockets, shifting his weight like he'd been waiting a while. I got out of the car slowly. He opened his mouth to speak. "No," I said, cutting him off, my voice sharp and clear. "Don't!" He took a half step forward. I held up my hand. "I don't want to talk to you." His mouth closed, the words he'd prepared dying before they reached the air. I didn't wait for a reply. I brushed past him and walked toward my front door. I was halfway up the front steps when I heard it, the voice I thought had already exhausted every last ounce of arrogance. "You know what?" Ethan shouted, his voice cracking just enough to betray the strain beneath it. "I don't regret a single word I said." I stopped, slowly turned around. He had taken a step closer to my gate now, no longer pacing or pretending to be composed. His jaw was clenched, eyes sharp, and hands balled into fists like he was fighting off something, shame, maybe, or just the reality that the apology he came here to deliver had morphed into a tantrum. "You heard me," he continued, arms flinging out like he needed an audience. "You don't belong there anymore, Liz. You're stuck in the past. Everything about you, the way you run meetings, the way you talk about systems like they matter more than branding, it's tired, outdated, the company's evolving, and we don't need dead weight dragging us down." There it was, the truth behind all those carefully worded memos and synthetic smiles. The way he'd looked through me in meetings, the way he'd dismissed my insights with half nods and smirks. This wasn't about progress. It never was. It was about control, and I threatened his illusion of it. "Don't look at me like that," he snapped, voice rising. "You think your years there earn you a free pass forever? You think because you've been through a few rough patches, you're untouchable? You don't own that place. You're just another cog, one that's rusting." I stared at him, letting the silence draw long and tight between us. I wanted him to see it, to feel the weight of it press against that fragile ego of his. Then I walked slowly back down the steps. Stopped at the edge of the walkway, just close enough that he couldn't pretend not to hear me. "You're right about one thing," I said. "I don't own Viridian." He shifted slightly, smugness threatening a comeback. "But I built half of it. Every major account you lean on for those flashy presentations, I helped land them. Every data system you pretend to understand, I designed it. You walked into a legacy that people like me created with years of grit and sacrifice, and you treat it like a toy your father left you in the will." His face twitched, but I didn't stop. "You call me outdated because you're too inexperienced to recognize wisdom when it speaks. You think being loud means being right. You think firing me made you powerful." I stepped closer. "But you didn't fire me. You exposed yourself to every executive, every department lead, every client who noticed I was gone. You showed them exactly who you are." He scoffed. "And who are you, Liz? Huh? Some aging analyst clinging to relevance?" I nodded slowly, almost smiling. "No, Ethan. I'm the one you're going to see in every gap you can't fill, every process you don't understand, every crisis you don't know how to navigate. I'm the one they're all going to remember when the system breaks, when the numbers fall, when the silence gets loud, because the person who actually knew what she was doing isn't there to fix it anymore." He looked away then, jaw tight, breathing shallow, and I leaned in one last time. "You're still just a daddy's boy, Ethan," I said quietly. wrapped in a title you didn't earn, walking through doors someone else opened for you. But here's the thing. Your parents won't always be there to save you. And when that day comes, when it's just you, with nothing to stand on but your own merit, it's going to break you, and you won't even see it coming. I turned back toward the house, climbed the steps slowly, and opened the door. This time, I didn't look back. I didn't slam it either. Some endings don't need punctuation. Just truth. Back at Viridian, the air felt heavier than usual. People moved through the halls with quiet urgency, pretending not to notice what was missing. But they noticed. My absence wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It lingered in unanswered emails, in systems that weren't running quite as smoothly, in the way Ethan's eyes avoided the analytics wing every time he passed it. Whispers had started. Even Evelyn, usually composed, had overheard one of the junior analysts murmur, "Have you heard anything about Liz?" to someone in the break room. They both fell silent when she walked in. At the top floor, behind a glass door that bore his name in silver lettering, Ronald Kinsey sat at his desk staring out at the skyline. The view was one he loved. Clean lines, open sky, everything orderly and contained. But nothing inside that room felt orderly now. His coffee had gone cold, the inbox on his screen was overflowing, and yet he hadn't touched a single message since 9 that morning. His mind was elsewhere, replaying conversations, trying to pinpoint where exactly things had begun to fracture. When Ethan entered without knocking, Ronald didn't look up right away. "She said no," Ethan announced, like he wanted to get it over with before he lost his nerve. Ronald blinked and turned his chair slightly, eyes narrowing. "What?" "I went to her house. I apologized. I did what you told me to do." Ethan looked exhausted, a mix of guilt and confusion etched across his face. "But she's not coming back." Ronald sat forward. "You apologized?" "Yes, I told her I was wrong. I told her the company needs her. That I—" He hesitated, swallowing his pride. "That I made a mistake." "And still, she said no?" Ronald's voice had lost its usual calm. It was edged now, cracked by disbelief. "She said I don't understand what it means to earn something," Ethan muttered. "That I didn't just fire her, I disrespected everything she built. She said, she won't be somewhere she isn't valued." Evelyn appeared in the doorway, arms crossed, her presence quiet but unmistakable. "She's right," she said simply. Ethan looked down, his fingers curled into fists. "I didn't mean to lose her." "But you did," Ronald said, voice low and bitter. He leaned back in his chair, eyes scanning the city like it might offer him answers. "She was the one person I could always count on. She stayed through every crisis, every round of layoffs, every merger negotiation. Hell, she held this place together when our own tech team was falling apart." Evelyn stepped inside, her tone more gentle now. "She stayed because she believed in this company, Ron. Not in the perks, not in the title, but in the people she worked with. She gave everything she had." "I thought she'd never leave," Ronald said, almost to himself. "I thought, after everything, we were family to her." "She didn't leave, Ron," Evelyn replied. "She was shoved out the door in front of everyone by your son, with words I wouldn't repeat to my worst enemy." Ronald rubbed his face, then stood slowly, walking to the window. "What do I do now? How do I fix this?" "You can't just fix this with a title or a bonus," she said. "This isn't about money. It's about dignity. It's about the fact that she gave you loyalty and you let someone humiliate her without even being in the room." Ethan looked up, wounded. "I tried to make it right." "No," Evelyn interrupted. "You tried to patch your own guilt. That's not the same." The room went quiet. Ronald stood still, watching the streets below. "She always said the numbers tell the story," he murmured. "But I ignored the story playing out right in front of me." He turned slowly back toward them, his face drawn. "She's gone," he said again. "And I let her go." It had been 5 days since I walked out of Viridian. 5 days without conference calls, without late-night dashboards, without back-to-back meetings over stale bagels. 5 days without the pressure that used to define my identity like a second skin. I thought I'd feel unmoored, lost. But strangely, I didn't. What I felt was clarity. Every morning since that awful meeting, I woke up to a dozen emails I didn't have to answer. Clients still emailed, those who'd heard whispers and wanted to know where I'd gone, but I replied to none. Not yet. Not until I decided what this next chapter would look like on my terms. That morning, as I sipped coffee in the sunlit corner of my kitchen, my phone buzzed again. Another message. Another unknown number? A client? No. It was Ronald. From Ronald Kinsey, subject. A thought, Liz. I know things have been tense. I heard Ethan came to speak with you. I understand it didn't go the way we hoped, but I'm writing to ask, maybe plead, that you reconsider. You loved this job. You gave so much of yourself to this company. Isn't that worth holding on to? I know what Ethan said was out of line, but he's young. He apologized. Maybe this is one of those moments where you offer a little grace. We all say things we regret. He'll grow from it. Please don't throw away 15 years over a single mistake. That's not wise. We need you. Ronald. I stared at the screen for a long time, my thumb hovering over the reply button, unmoving. It wasn't just the message itself, it was the subtext, the subtle twisting of reality, as if what happened to me was small, as if being publicly degraded, insulted, and fired wasn't worthy of consequence. Not wise? The word lodged in my throat like a splinter. That's when I knew. It wasn't just Ethan. Ronald hadn't come to defend me because he valued me. He came because he was trying to preserve the machine, the system I had helped keep running, the clients I had retained, the structure I'd built from the ground up. To him, this wasn't about justice. It was about utility. He didn't want to make it right. He wanted to rewind time to when I was still silently solving problems so others could take the credit. Forgiveness wasn't what he was asking for. He was asking me to shrink. Again. And I'd done enough of that. I didn't respond to Ronald's email, not at first. Instead, I opened a folder I had quietly labeled porch camera footage the night Ethan showed up at my house. A habit from years of living alone. I had security cameras installed around my property. Nothing fancy, just a small doorbell cam and a side lens tucked beneath the roof. I hadn't thought twice about them until I found myself standing on my front step, facing down a man who'd tried to rewrite history. Ethan had come to apologize, yes, but only after being told to. What followed was no apology at all. And now I had proof. Crisp audio, clear visuals. His voice rang out sharp through my speakers as I replayed the moment he snapped. You're old, and this is business, not a retirement hobby. You don't belong in that office anymore. Every bitter syllable. He had tried to walk it back later, of course, tried to reframe the narrative. But the truth doesn't need revision, it just needs a platform. So I gave it one. I wrote a short email, no fluff, no anger. Just the facts. Subject, context. Ronald, since you asked me to reconsider, I thought you should see exactly what you're asking me to forgive. Please find attached the video from the night your son came to my home. The camera caught everything. No edits. No dramatization. Just the truth. Liz. I attached the clip and hit send. Then I shut my laptop and went for a walk. By the time I got back, my phone had exploded with notifications. But they weren't from Ronald. They were from my old colleagues. Chaos had broken out at Veridian. Without me, the systems I had designed, custom-coded, cross-integrated, deeply nuanced, had begun to crack. Daily operations that used to hum like clockwork now sputtered and stalled. Reports were overdue. Client inquiries went unanswered. The error logs piled up. 3 major dashboards failed to load by noon, triggering frantic messages from longtime accounts asking where Miss Whitmore was. The team was scrambling, calling IT, calling consultants, trying to reverse engineer processes they never fully understood, because I'd always just handled it. And this time, I wasn't there. Slack threads lit up with frustration. Someone leaked part of the meeting minutes, the one where Ethan announced my firing. That only added fuel to the fire. She carried the weight, and we let her walk. I told you this would happen. They fired our anchor. Inside the executive suite, Ronald finally watched the video. The blood drained from his face. Ethan's voice echoed off the walls of his office, unfiltered, cruel, undeniable. Evelyn stood beside him, arms crossed, lips pressed tight with restrained fury. He didn't speak for a long time. Then he looked up from the screen and said the only thing left to say, "I didn't know." But it was too late. He knew now. The storm inside Viridian was no longer brewing. It had broken. The video had circulated through the upper floors within hours. Whispers turned to open confrontation. Even the more passive executives, the ones who usually stayed out of interpersonal matters, found themselves speechless watching Ethan's tirade play out on a 22-inch conference room screen. There was no spinning it. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about what it revealed. About leadership, about character, about what the company had become under unchecked entitlement. Ronald called Ethan into his office the next morning. The meeting lasted 11 minutes. Ethan emerged white-faced and hollow, carrying a cardboard box. No blazer, no smug expression, just silence. He didn't look back as he stepped into the elevator. Ronald didn't call a press conference or write a carefully worded company-wide email. He didn't even try to hide behind HR. He got in his car and drove to my house. When I opened the door, I saw something in him I hadn't seen in a long time: humility. The same man who once shook my hand 15 years ago and welcomed me into the company as our secret weapon now stood on my doorstep with tired eyes and no defenses. "Liz," he said quietly, "you were right." He didn't try to soften it. He didn't try to justify Ethan's words or his own silence. He just let the weight of his failure hang in the air between us. I told Ethan it's over. No more hand-holding. No more legacy rides. He's on his own now. Let him see how far arrogance takes him without a parachute. I said nothing, just watched him. "And you," he exhaled, "you deserved better. Not just from him, from me." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a simple folder. "It's your offer, your role, on your terms. No conditions, no politics. Evelyn's already signed off. The board has too." "I'm not sure I want to come back," I said. Calm, not cruel, just honest. "I wouldn't blame you," he said. "But this place isn't right without you, Liz. The people know it. The clients know it. Hell, even I know it now." He looked me in the eye. "I'm not asking you to forgive us. I'm asking you to come rebuild it. The right way. As my equal. As the person this company should have been led by all along." The silence stretched. Then I reached out, took the folder, and opened it. The title had changed. Chief Operations Officer Liz Whitmore. Not a token, not a gesture, a truth, finally acknowledged. I looked at Ronald and said simply, "If I come back, things will be different. I'm not playing small anymore, and I'm not protecting people from their own incompetence." He smiled faintly, a man who had finally been forced to see clearly. I wouldn't expect anything less. That Monday, I walked back into Viridian, not through the side door, not quietly, not with my head down. People stood, applauded, not for show, but for recognition. I took my seat at the head of the table, opened my laptop, and began again. Not from the beginning, from the top, and this time on my terms.